Welcome to the Grid Podcast, episode 21. Our goal is to educate and to bring hard-hitting truths about America's critical infrastructure. I'm your host, Maria Sumn. A quick disclaimer. Political opinions expressed in the podcast by participants are their opinion and not necessarily that of the Grid Podcast. Please subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you can be notified when we go live. This helps us promote the channel on YouTube. So today's topic is going to be a really interesting one because I thought I had protected my home, but it doesn't seem like I've done that. It's estimating common mode E1 surge protection performance outside the Faraday cage by frequency chunks. Today I welcome my two esteemed guests, physicist Dr. Richard Guyire, and I welcome back Rick Smith, who's a distributed energy resource developer and resilient microgrid director for the Task Force on National and Homeland Security. So welcome Rick, welcome Richard. Why don't you, we'll start with Rick. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll move on to Richard. Oh. Okay.
There we go. All right. Well, I'm a retired IT infrastructure architect for Chevron, and now old guy and volunteer for the EMP task force. I also participate with the Foundation for Infrastructure Resilience, and also a board member of the Enterprise Wireless Alliance, and
Richard, you're going to have to turn your music off because you have music playing in the background.
Okay, just a second.
Anyway, so that's enough about me. As soon as Richard gets the volume turned down, we'll.
Okay, I was just ready to send you the file. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
do you want me to? I'll send the file to. I'll introduce myself.
And also, if you can turn your camera up a little bit. Yeah, there we go.
All
so
right.
We see your whole face. Awesome.
All right. I'll send
Good
you the
stuff,
file.
Richard. Okay.
It's okay. Well, I'm Richard Guyire. I used to work in geophysics and particularly the magnetotelluric field of the Earth, which would include solar storms. But in addition, I have background I worked in geophysics as well as a senior physicist at NIST. And what we're going to be talking today about some of the high altitude electromagnetic pulses, particularly E1, and I have theoretical analysis that has been done already for modeling it. And I guess that's all I'll say right now. I'm retired too, but I've been a member of the Electromagnetic Task Force for quite a while.
Yeah. Well, welcome, Richard. Welcome, Rick. And I'm just going to let you talk about this subject because obviously I don't know enough about it. I thought I was protected in my home, but I guess that's not the case.
Well, you probably are.
Nobody is protected. Your cell phones won't work. Nothing. Not even your cell phones.
All
right. I don't know if you wanted to start out with your presentation, Rick.
Yeah, I can do that, and I'll give Richard a little bit more time to bring things together. So,
okay.
Yeah. Okay. So remember, we're kind of getting two perspectives here. We've got myself, which is more of an engineer, ham radio guy, and Richard, who's a true scientist. So the first part of the presentation is going to be the layman's view of life, and it may not be 100%, but there's a lot of stuff that most of us don't know, including myself, but you got to ask the right questions, and our knowledge, we build on each other, right? We learn. So I'm going to throw out some ideas as it relates to E1, protecting yourself from E1 in the home, and particularly make the distinction between the common mode, which is between the wires and ground, and the differential mode, which is between the wires. Anyway, so let's start with slide 1, which is just kind of a cover shot there.
Okay, it's on.
Okay. For some reason, I'm not able to see what's going out. Is there a way I can do that? Or?
I don't know from your side. The only time you can do that is if you're actually presenting on your end.
Oh, okay, that's fine. All right. Well, let's go to slide 2.
Okay,
So,
I'll go to slide 2. Just tell me when you want me to. I'll advance.
yeah, let's do that. Okay.
Okay.
So, a lot of the analysis that's done regarding E1 pulses is done in the time domain. But I'm thinking, at least my mind thinks better in the frequency domain. So, given that the spectrum of an E1 pulse is extremely broad, it covers a wide range of frequencies, and we know that different frequencies interact with the environment very differently. So, the idea of kind of breaking it up into chunks of frequencies made some sense in my mind. We'll see where this goes. But the goal is to kind of understand the nature of the E1 pulse and all of its little personality, so we can better protect our world from that. So go to slide 3, which is disclosures.
Okay, we're
Are you there?
we're on
Okay.
slide 3. Mm-hmm.
All right. So the power grid, as you know, acts like a big antenna picking up the E1 pulse and bringing it home to your house. That's a bad thing. We know the power grid is vast and it's all interconnected. And the question that inquiring minds, of course, want to know is how much of this pulse that's out there on the grid is actually going to show up at my doorstep? And that's a difficult question. We know in a generic sense, we know that the lower frequencies tend to follow the wires, and the very high frequencies just fly through the air. So, with some of the very higher frequencies, they're going to get into your house, and you can't stop a cell phone signal from coming in a normal house. You can't stop a cell phone signal from coming in, nor can you block FM radio or AM radio. So anyway, but in order to kind of, one thing that we also know too, and this is, I don't know if you have to be a ham radio guy to know this or not, but a piece of wire that's very small in comparison to the wavelength doesn't work worth a darn as an antenna, so it doesn't really pull in much. On the other side of the equation, if you have a wire that's extremely long, much, much longer than a dipole antenna, which is a half wavelength in length, that extra length in the wire doesn't necessarily translate into you pulling in a lot more signal than you could with a dipole antenna. So this analysis, and this is a big disclaimer, because this is a difficult question to answer. I'm postulating that if we look at the area, what's called the capture area of the dipole antenna, we can get a sense of how much of that larger grid is actually contributing to what we're going to be seeing in our homes. So next slide, please.
Okay, before we move to the next slide, is someone either vacuuming or if there's
My gardener.
Oh, your gardener, a leaf blower. It says it's one of the two, because we can hear it. I can hear it in the background. So just so I know.
They're finishing up.
Okay. All right. So we're in the next slide now.
All right. So referring, from the MIL 188, 125 standard, it suggests that the spectrum of the E1 pulse ranges from 100 kilohertz to 1,000 megahertz, right? So what I'm proposing in this analysis is just to take that spectrum and break it into smaller chunks. And I've decided to use a half decade. Now, a decade is another power of 10, like 1, 10, 100, 1,000. A half decade is the middle of that, a half of that, right? But I didn't choose, for example, for the decade between 1 and 10, I didn't choose 5. I choose the geometric mean, which the way the radio waves think, that's kind of the middle of the band. So the geometric mean, which is the kind of in the middle of each chunk, is the frequency for each chunk that I'm going to use in the analysis. Again, this is not a perfect analysis, but this is to put a little bit of process behind what I'm doing here. Uh, Now, the other starting point for this analysis is I am leveraging the work of D.V. Guyire and William Prather from an IEEE transaction. And from there, I've extracted their graph that shows the frequency domain power density across the spectrum that we're talking about. So I just crudely, graphically interpreted those numbers from that work, and that becomes input for what I'm trying to do. So the information that comes off the basic graph is in terms of kilovolts per meter per hertz of bandwidth, right? So that's telling you for a 1 hertz chunk how much signal would be in that 1 hertz chunk. Then as you broaden that out to a range of frequencies, obviously there's more signal in a broader chunk, right? So now the other thing you have to realize is that the amount of volt, it's being expressed as a voltage, and even though you're doubling the bandwidth, it doesn't mean you're doubling the voltage, because there's a square root relationship there. Voltage is equal to the square root of power times resistance, and for a constant resistance, what that tells me is the fudge factor that I'm using to scale up how much energy is in a big many hertz wide chunk. I'm having to take the square root of the ratio between that many hertz and ones. For example, in the first chunk, let's say, is from 100 kilohertz to 316 kilohertz. That's 216,000 hertz of bandwidth. So I'm taking the 216,000 hertz of bandwidth, and I don't directly apply that to the initial number. I take the square root of that number to come up with the fudge factor. Anyway, so in the bottom line is of all of this is calculating the volts per meter, which is back to field intensity on each one of these chunks that I've created. Next slide, please.
Okay.
So the next step is to remember, I don't know if everybody's aware of how volts per meter is calculated. It's basically, it comes from if you could imagine having a point source of radiation, a transmitter that's transmitting out in all directions, and surrounding that transmitter is an imaginary sphere, and that sphere has area on the, if you could look at the area, which is 4 pi r squared of that imaginary sphere, you're basically seeing how much energy is going to be captured in 1 square meter of that sphere at distance x, right? So once you've figured out how much power is hitting each 1 meter by 1 meter square, then you translate that into a power using the characteristic impedance of free space, which is 377 ohms. So basically, we're going through a little gyration here to figure out what we really want to get to is how many watts per square meter is what is the power density. So we do that. And then it's a matter of going back to this idea of the dipole antenna and its so-called capture area. So we've got a density of power. Now, if we can calculate how much area that power is going to be grabbed by the antenna, so to speak, we know how much power is going to be, quote unquote, coming down the wire. That's the theory, right? Mm-hmm. So we end up calculating the power from that a dipole would pull in, by basically multiplying the density times the area. Okay. Now that we know how much power, which is a lot, we can make another assumption, because we want to get back to what voltage would we expect to see coming in on the power line. Now, in the MIL 188 125 spec, the assumed impedance, and this is a stretch, but they had to assume something. The assumed impedance of the power grid is 60 ohms. So I'm taking that power and using the E equals the square root of PR, where R is 60, to translate that back into a voltage. And so then we go on to the next slide, which should be the actual calculations. And you can see that whole process that I just enumerated, kind of boils down here. Important things to look at is the next to the last line in the spreadsheet. You see the voltages that are calculated for each frequency segment,
Mm-hmm.
and you're looking at those and going, "Oh my God, those are ridiculous. They're kind of high, right?" And I think the lower frequency area, particularly the 100 to 316 kilohertz, is off the chart high, probably because there's, when wires are, I also mentioned, I want to back up a second, the very last line, you see the wavelength at the reference frequency of each reference frequency. So at the very low frequencies, the wavelength is huge. It's 1,685 meters, right? So if the power line is only a few meters above the ground, maybe 10 or 20 meters above the ground, the power line is basically paralleling the ground and very close to the ground from the perspective of the radio wave. So it looks more like a transmission line than an antenna. So the true effectiveness of a power line picking up the signal at those low frequencies is probably far less than a dipole. So that 850,000 volts that's referenced there is probably far less than that. And even the next one at 150, well, I don't know. When you get into again, I don't have any way I'm just following a procedure here and trying to think about the implications. But as you see, the next three columns there, still pretty high, at least the next two, 157 kilovolts and 222 kilovolts. Now it's interesting, if you go back to the original work by the competent folks at IEEE and actually integrate the area under the curve, the interesting observation is about 2/3 of the entire energy of the entire spectrum between 100 kilohertz and 1 gigahertz is between 1 megahertz and 10 megahertz. Well, actually, no, excuse me, correction. Between 300 kilohertz and 10 megahertz holds 2/3 of the entire energy of the entire spectrum. So that gives you a sense of, these are the frequencies that are going to be coming in on the wire, so to speak, if you believe that. Okay. Next slide. Now let's talk about your home. And so what I'm trying to do with this diagram here, first of all, just a quick orientation. So you've got the power, the outside world coming in on the left. You've got your meter, and you got your whole house surge protector, and your surge protector is tied to ground. You've got a ground rod with an assumed resistance of 8 ohms. You've also got a big fat wire from the panel down to the ground. That wire looks like it would shunt every last ounce of the energy from an E1 pulse to ground. But unfortunately, the laws of physics say that even a straight wire, a fat one, has a certain amount of inductance. And when you introduce inductance, you can impede the flow of high frequency current. So anyway, let me just, I'm not disparaging whole house surge protectors. For one thing, I wish I had one, because one of the things they do a great job of is clamping the L1 neutral and ground at the same potential, so that you don't get a lot of voltage between the wires. So if you look at like the light bulb there, the light bulb has no external reference to ground. So as long as the voltage, even though it may be high, is the same on both the two wires going to the light bulb, there's no voltage across the light bulb, and it's not under any stress. Now, when you come to something like your refrigerator, and if you were not an E1 buff, you might have used copper pipe to tie in your water on your refrigerator, right? So now you've got an issue because whatever voltage exists between the three wires and ground, now with respect to ground, is now going to drive current out inadvertently, not where it's supposed to go, but it's going to go back out through the copper line that's supplying your refrigerator. That's a problem. Similar problem with your big screen TV. If you've got an external cable connection, it's referencing a different ground than your main panel ground. So you've got another path for that common mode signal to travel, which is bad. Okay, so inquiring minds want to know, if I put in a whole home surge protector, how is that going to, we know it does a great job with the differential mode, but how is that going to help me with protecting from this other ill called the common mode? So the next slide is a simple analysis of that, and I'll explain the assumptions here. So actually, I need to go back to the diagram. So so in the analysis, we're going to go back to the MIL 188 standard and assume that the outside world can be represented by a very simple 60 ohm resistor in terms of its source impedance. So what you end up doing is having a simple voltage divider circuit where you've got a 60 ohm impedance in series with the inductance of the ground wire leading from the surge protector to ground. And then, of course, the resistance of the ground rod itself. So as you run through the analysis and do a simple voltage division calculation, I call your attention to the divide ratio column. That's basically telling you a numeric number which represents kind of the percentage of the original voltage that got knocked down by the essentially the surge protector shorting that common mode voltage to ground. So you can see at the lowest frequencies, the reference frequency of 178 kilohertz, it's about 12%. So it's knocking out. It's almost, in terms of decibels, that's almost 20 dB, 100 to 1 reduction in the power of the signal, right? But as you go further up in frequency, pick 5.6 megahertz, which again, that's still relatively low considering the spectrum goes all the way up to 1,000 megahertz. So even by the time you get to 5.2 megahertz, your effectiveness is now dropped from around 20 dB or near 20 to around 6. So you're basically letting half of what came in go out because you're getting increased impedance in this big coil, not a big coil, in the wire that's going to ground. And finally, when you get up into the higher frequencies, just to be ridiculous, at 562 megahertz, 98.8% of the voltage that came in gets passed right on to you. So your surge protector is not helping you at all at that point, with respect to common mode. Okay, so let me go on here. So move on to the next page, Maria, the first observation page. Are you there? Okay. Okay, so this just summarizes what I just said about the undermining effects of that inductance. The other thing is that if you notice, comparing some of the voltages that are predicted in some other scientific work, some of the numbers that you see on this analysis don't perfectly correlate. So that's a concern that that this is not 100% exact analysis, but it's looking at it from a different way. Okay. This again, the comment about the TV, the big screen TV and the refrigerator. Recommendation, of course, for the big screen TV. You've probably seen these fancy protectors and wondered, why would I want to spend my money on that? A fancy protector that drags the power and the cable TV through the same protector. And the logic behind that is to put the cable TV line and the power line at the same potential, so that difference potential doesn't get pushed against your television set. Now, one of the things that is a little bit of a concern, to the extent that your protection actually imbalances the line, you could actually be undoing some of the um, differential mode protection that your whole house protector is providing. So, okay. Now,
So,
Bri-
so
Bri-
Rick, so Rick, from a woman's point of view, I can do without my big screen TV, but I can't do without my refrigerator. So,
so I would
but
recommend go out to Home Depot today and get some plastic water line, and you'll be fine. And you need a whole house protector as well. Uh, now, could you bring up the diagram of the
Can I ask
the
you a comment,
yeah, Richard?
Rick? On the surge protectors, do they commonly use metal oxide varistors or do they use avalanche diodes?
Uh, I think they're probably of both types, but I'm honestly I'm not the expert on that, man. I'm
Just a
sorry.
question.
Yeah,
It's just a
but I think
question.
one of the metal oxide varistors, I guess, work very well, but they have a life expectancy issue. Is that true? Or tell me what you know about that, Richard.
I was going to ask you about that. So,
Oh,
I-
okay.
no, I could find out. I could find out, but I was just wondering when you were talking about surge protectors, what commonly most people would have. Now, there's a difference probably for the average citizen than the Defense Department too.
Well, for sure. So, um, anyway, what's amazing is you can send 1,000 megabits of data down a crummy, twisted pair of copper wire, and it comes out straight on the other side. So, how does that happen? Well, it means that people that engineered the Ethernet for your computer knew something about common mode and built some science into the transformers that actually put the signal on the line and take it off the line. You can see that there is a transformer, well, there's two transformers as part of the design, but the transformer that's in series uniquely adds to the common mode signal. It looks like an inductor, so it's creating an impedance. It's slowing down, restricting the flow of the common mode current. But since the data is differential mode, and since the currents on each wire are going opposite directions, the transformer effectively acts like a short and passes those signals straight through without screwing them up. So my thought was somebody who wants to make a new product could take a page out of the Ethernet history and come up with a protector that leverages this technology that's in our computers and applies it to my refrigerator and my big screen TV. So that was just a thought here. The other thing that I've postulated is that having built, what do you call it, inverters in off-grid systems, one of the things you have to deal with is sharp transients, that switching transients, and those things are sometimes difficult to get rid of. And an E1 pulse probably looks like and smells like a switching transient. So the mitigation that's often used in inverter design is called a snubber circuit. And a snubber circuit is nothing more than a resistor capacitor network that has a time constant that's roughly equal to the width of the pulse you're trying to get rid of. So it kind of lines up with that pulse and sucks it out, turns it into heat, and in fact, my designs aren't actually that good. That's why by the time I put all the snubbers in, my efficiency is down to 90%. So I won't talk about that today. But anyway, um, now
Yeah,
next slide.
the efficiencies are multiplicative too.
Yeah, yeah,
If you have two things that are like 50% efficient, it's 0.5 times 0.5, so it's 0.25 actually.
yeah. That's true.
So,
Um, Absolutely. Here's the next slide, Maria. Okay, so here's the homework question and the provocative thought of the day. Okay, we hear a lot about the need for speed when it comes to surge protection, but ask yourself, how far can electricity travel in a wire per nanosecond? The answer is about 1 foot per nanosecond. And if that's true, and the whole power system in your neighborhood gets hit in the very same, I picture this E1 pulse coming down from the heavens and irradiating the entire neighborhood all at one time, right? So, but if it hits my neighbor's house, it's going to take a little time for the electricity to flow through the wires over to my house. So, so this whole thing about focusing myopically on the nanosecond is probably not the whole picture, because I'm thinking if you were to look at if you had an oscilloscope on the line when a E1 pulse hit, likely you would see it would be an impulse and it would create a massive ringing, and that ringing would go on for, I don't know, maybe not a microsecond, but it would go on for many, many, many nanoseconds. Anyway, so that's the thought on that.
So just to make sure we're on the same slide, I am moving to future thoughts. Is that where we're at?
Oh, hold on. No, I was already. No, go past future slots.
Okay. Homework, question, thought, and provocation.
Yeah, and I just read that. So
Okay.
basically, that's pretty much the end of my prepared talk, and we can take questions. And Richard's getting queued up. So Richard, what have you been thinking, particularly about this? Does it look like an antenna or a transmission line issue?
Yeah, I was just looking at, for E1, E2, or E3, coupling between that and above ground transmission lines. And
Yep.
you can look at a perfectly conducting Earth, which would be naive. You really need to consider the ground. If you consider a perfectly conducting Earth, compared to the atmosphere, it will be very inaccurate.
So
And you do have to consider soil types.
Richard,
When you look at coupling between a above ground power line for E1 or E2 or E3.
So Richard, what's worse?
And that can be done, actually. That can be theoretically done. That's what transmission line theory.
So Richard, what's worse, a perfectly conducting Earth or a crummy conducting Earth in terms of elevating or suppressing the risk that we would actually see?
Actually, an imperfect conductivity.
Okay.
Not a perfectly conductive Earth. The soil is the most important, and it can be almost dominant. If in terms of above line power lines.
Yeah.
And that's actually been looked at by MITRE Corporation.
Is that because of standing waves, or is that because of a different phenomenon, or why is that?
I don't want to call it standing waves because they did it in time domain, for impulses. So it's over a wide frequency range. If you take a Fourier transform, yeah.
Okay.
So actually, if you consider a perfectly conducting Earth, it'll be far in the error.
Okay.
You have to consider an imperfectly conducting Earth, and that does depend on soil type and water content, but not in magnetotellurics. If you look at 60 hertz in magnetotellurics, you're sampling things that'll go down to 10 kilometers.
Yeah.
So.
Well, would you say that my analysis using the antenna idea kind of ignores, for the most part, the Earth, and mistakenly ignores that, and therefore maybe that's why some of the voltages that I come up with are so darn high?
It could be. I'll tell you what you do. Calculate it for an imperfectly conducting half space. Like a model of a half space of the Earth. And you assign the resistivities or conductivities.
Okay. For that, we would need a good scientist like you, Richard. That's over my head.
Well, we both could do it. We could do it together. And
Okay.
actually, a lot of this is. It was a lot of code was written by Lawrence Livermore. It was called the NEC code, numerical electromagnetics. And
Okay.
some parts, I don't know whether all those things have been released, that the Defense Department had, but some of that code is available
Okay.
for computations.
Yep.
It's a NEC code, NEC, and it was a lot of that was written quite a while ago by Lawrence Livermore Labs. I don't have a copy. If I would, I'd give it to you. But I think we could obtain it, and we could explore some of these questions.
Yeah.
And actually, we don't have to consider a layered Earth. We could consider just a simple half space, but do consider different soil types and water
Right.
saturation.
So, Richard, explain to me what's a double exponential, because that's one of the models, right?
Yeah,
That's used.
that is one of the models that is used.
What does
And
that mean?
I can send it to you. I could show you the equations for it, but you don't have them. But
I
I
was
could,
thinking
yeah,
of the
for a
layman's
double
exponential.
exponential. That's right.
Does that mean just exponential, but the attack it's steeper, or what does that mean?
Yeah. I don't know. Let me see whether I can show you something on that. This comes from the MITRE report. The MITRE report was not classified, but they did consider a double exponential. See if I can find it. Late time coupling of above ground cables using transmission line methods. The standards that were used. And here's things like this. You could change here if you got a cable, above ground cable, you could have something like this, right? I don't think you can see it.
Yeah.
You can't see it. Well, there you can see a little bit. Above line cables.
I think, Richard, all the audience.
Yeah. But it was considered for E1, E2, and E3. And I'm just looking. I'll find that double exponential and I'll send it to you.
Well, Richard, looking at that in the time domain, does it support what I was suggesting, that the effects of the E1 pulse last in the cable long after the E1 pulse has come and gone?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
That was done. This report was actually done in 2014. So it's been a while.
Another random thought I had about E1 as it relates to the distribution power grid. And again, I don't know how relevant this is, but there might actually be a difference between distribution systems that are, delta centric versus Y centric. And that has to do with whether your transformers at the in location are across the line or between the line and ground. But if you look at a place like Texas, for example, most of the distribution in the Texas area, and probably in the eastern United States, is Y based. So a lot of the connections to the end transformers go to ground. And
Yeah.
at each of the points where there's actually a transformer, there's yet another ground, another ground. So you've got grounds on the electrical distribution system very frequently. Now, in opposition to that, in California, where I live, in my neighborhood, all the distribution is delta. So all the transformers are across the line, and there is no reference to ground, which I don't know if that means that there's a higher chance that you'd build up a larger voltage on the distribution system and have a higher probability of arcing through the transformer at an E1 or not. But I don't know I'm sure somebody's thought about the differences in the architecture and how they may be more or less vulnerable to E1. Just a thought.
Yeah.
So basically, Maria, that's all I know. Less every day is.
You do get some ringing effects, so that's for sure.
Yeah. And then the idea of using snubber technology, do you think there's a chance that of course, yeah, would that help bring some of the ringing out?
Probably.
And the
But
good thing about
like you said, in an open house, you don't have any shielding.
no, you don't.
So you don't have any shielding.
Yeah. So I hope I haven't been overly optimistic about the likelihood that everybody's home's going to be fine, but there's some truth to the fact that if you can control the differential, the differential mode signal, you're in better shape than you would be otherwise. That's science.
So
I'm not hearing you, Maria. I don't know why.
Can't hear you, Maria. What? Can't hear you.
I muted myself. So
Oh, okay.
just in case, because there was some external noise. So so even if I run to Home
in a
Depot,
sense,
can you hear me?
these EMP HEMPs have always been around since nuclear weapons, and there is no safety.
There is no safety. So even if I
Not
change
really.
my copper pipe to a plastic water pipe to my fridge, my fridge is still toast.
Maria, what would it do even to the cell phone towers?
Wow. All right. So
And that's not even counting the overhead power lines, that go into your house, and so I don't want to say doomsday, but it kind of is doomsday.
yeah, everything is going to be fried. Even if you put things in a Faraday cage, assuming that you build ones big enough to protect, that you're saying it's gone. Like even anything in your basement, is anything safe? Nothing. I'm just asking.
Well,
Okay.
yeah,
Can you imagine a grid of wires around your whole house?
No.
And even then, take the E1 pulse? It's nanoseconds.
yeah.
So you'd have to be covered with metal. But even then, external destruction
Yeah.
it wouldn't matter because everything externally would be ruined.
So going to the idea of protecting specific things like a radio, for example, if you put it in a metal trash can, there's a pretty good chance it's not going to get smoked. Or
Right.
if you
Right.
you can put something in your microwave oven, just don't turn it on.
Right. How many people
fact-
are going to do that? Usually E1 or a high altitude electromagnetic pulse. People don't even have time to think about it.
That's true. We'd be wondering what happened. So
And it'd be throughout the grid too. So it's like a doomsday weapon. It's like they always thought nobody would ever dare do that.
Yeah, that's what we're hoping.
Right. But look at what we see today. Maybe people would do it. I don't want to put the countries. I don't think I need to.
So the only thing, there really isn't anything we can do aside from getting tin garbage cans or metal garbage cans and putting a spare laptop in there, maybe your spare ham radio, having spares of everything that, so you can
Yeah,
put it out, right?
yeah. Well, keep in mind
I
that
think having a ham radio license would be useful for everybody.
Yeah.
yeah,
I do believe that having ham radio licenses and education, and more people being ham radio operators.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
here's a question. This is, would you park an electric car in an attached garage? Fire hazard? Question mark.
No,
No.
no, never. No, I wouldn't. Somebody else wants. I mean, maybe it'll be okay.
Maybe.
But if there's any shorting whatsoever of those lithium-ion batteries, it's a chemical fire. You're never going to get away from it.
So
It just makes. I
no,
mean, it might be okay, but I wouldn't do. I would never do it.
so this leads
And I
me
mean,
to
look at in Colorado, you can get a free electric furnace. You buy the lithium-ion batteries, of course, and where are you going to put them?
in the
If
basement.
if they ever shorted, you'd have a chemical fire you couldn't put out. I mean, XL is offering that right now
They are.
with the profits they make from this from us.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
and this is to be green.
Yes.
Uh,
So if
but
you're
it's not
smart,
green. It's very dangerous. It's very dangerous.
right.
Yeah.
So
And
basically, if you're smart,
it's not really free.
no, it's
It's
not.
not really
You're
it's
actually
never
putting a
been.
fire hazard in your house if you
Yeah,
do.
that's what they're espousing.
Yeah.
So for my home energy system, I've been lusting after the lithium ion batteries, but I'm not going there. I continue to use good old Costco golf cart batteries. So, um,
Well, at
but
least lead acid batteries. I mean, okay, the charge is very good. You know, the charge storage is very good, lithium ion, but there is no doubt about it. But they're dangerous, and it's not recyclable. Lead acid batteries are recyclable. So, which would you rather take? If you had a
yeah,
lithium ion, if you had a car with lithium ion batteries in it, and you were involved in an accident, hopefully it wouldn't explode. With a
yep.
lead acid battery, it won't.
Hmm.
So
So this is kind of off topic, but um, I was reminded when I looked at my itinerary for United Airlines that the green hangover is not over because printed there on my itinerary was a calculation of how many pounds of CO2 my butt was going to create on this earth because I took a trip to Virginia. So,
actually, Rick, you don't have to worry about it. Carbon dioxide is going to be used up all in photosynthesis. And
well,
that's
yeah, you
true.
know that.
It'll be used up in photosynthesis. And if you don't have any carbon dioxide, you're not going to have any agriculture. You're not going to have any trees. You're not going
Yeah.
to have any green bushes.
But-
You're not going to have any grasses. And what do they produce that we do breathe?
Right.
Yeah.
Oxygen. And what do we breathe out
Carbon
from
dioxide.
we breathe out carbon dioxide.
Right.
So should we close our mouths not to breathe because we're giving out carbon dioxide? And also methane. Methane is not due to just excrements of mammals. 70% comes from rotten wood in EPA protected wetlands. It's rotten wood. And we're going off on a different engineer. But methane in the atmosphere,
It's all
what
related,
happens
Richard.
to it?
That, well, the
It's
thing
destroyed
is,
by the hydroxyl anion, OH minus 1 anion.
so here's the problem. You and I and the majority of the people who happen to actually get an education a few years back we know this, but they're not teaching this to the younger generation.
Unfortunately, I don't
Yeah.
see it.
And
I
so they don't know. So when they hear some green meanie say
I know.
carbon
I
dioxide
know.
is killing it, and they're like, do you
And
know
you
when
know,
they don't know that.
carbon dioxide is a fizz in your pop can.
Yeah.
Did you know that?
Yeah.
And
I
now,
did.
if carbon
They don't.
dioxide goes into oceanic warm waters, it forms carbonic acid. It's a weak acid, so you should look out at reefs, for fish life. But what else does it form? In warm waters, lime. And then under compression, limestone. 25% of the sedimentary rocks on the earth.
Or limestone. Yep.
Yeah.
Wow.
That came from carbon dioxide.
Yep.
Far longer than we've ever even been using, any oil or gas.
Yeah.
So
So we have another question here, a hypothetical question. Assuming
Okay.
we will be able to protect our large EHV trains from a catastrophic CME event, a Miyake event, what is the next greatest challenge to protecting human life?
You're talking about the extra high voltage transformers?
extra high voltage, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
I think that's what it is.
well, I would say, that's a tough question, but I would say that being given the difficulty in getting and replacing these EHV transformers, if we really had to, maybe we could change somewhat our strategy of how we operate the grid and operate islands of generation that probably wouldn't have the overall reliability that we enjoy today, but we could have some things working and we could let by. But again, if something happens like an E1, it's very difficult because so many things are broken in so many places, and the efficiency of fixing it when you're so discombobulated is a real problem. So, but if somebody did nothing more than take our EHV transformers away, of course the grid would immediately crash. But there might be an opportunity to cobble something together. It'd be difficult, but
Rick, do you think that the United States should be making their own high voltage EHV transformers?
oh yeah, that's an obvious yes.
How long would it take for us to buy one from China?
Well, I've
That's
heard
what
that 3
6
years
years,
is 6
about
years.
6.
Wow.
And we're not getting all of but most of our transformers from China.
Yeah. The other thing
So
that, of
China
course,
exercises a lot of power over us.
they do. One of the things that we should be doing, obviously, immediately is
I didn't
being
mean
careful.
electrical power.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, that'll too, both
yeah. And we should
political
be
power and electrical. So
one
anyway,
obvious thing we should be doing is being more careful that when we bring in products that we depend on from countries that may not have our best interest at heart, they need to be thoroughly inspected, every single one. We're not even doing that. I'm disappointed. So
Yeah.
anyway, Maria, that's it's. I think we're just talking here. I don't think we're making.
Yeah, does anyone have
now
any
for
questions?
those who are interested in the EMP task force, we could have our own computer programs. We don't have to go to universities or the government, and we could calculate it by ourselves, coupling to power lines. But it is kind of academic, but it gives you insight. It gives insights.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was the hope of today's presentation, is to slice the apple a little differently to get a different perspective on things. So.
Well, there's been a lot of very good work done by Texas A&M too,
Mm-hmm.
In modeling. But the only thing I would say is DC. It's not AC, it's DC.
Mm-hmm.
They're assuming 60 hertz. It's good enough for DC. And the other thing that could be called into question is that when they assume that the resistivities are just a function of latitude, that has nothing to do with it. It's a type of soils and water content. And that's what they're doing now. I mean, they have been doing that, but that's not. It's
Your
not
life.
really. It's not. I don't want to look that to be a criticism. I just say it could be improved. That would be a better way to say. You know, Thomas Overby and the people at Texas A&M do great work, but I would just say it could be improved. That's all. Because I do respect them, you know, and I just think it could be improved, maybe from us. So, and I would be more in favor, instead of using magnetotellurics, a localized. What were you magnetotellurics? You go far, far away from a transformer. You go far, far away from any source of noise. They consider that noise, power line noise. So and at 60 hertz, you know, you're looking at depths much greater than soil depths, and I would use different technique.
Yep.
So here's another question. It says, would it cost too much to have grid electrical wires running underground versus overhead? I mean, would that offer any protection at all?
I think it would.
Yeah, it would give more protection, but what's the cost?
That's true.
Look at all the overhead lines. What would the cost be? It would be gigantic to bury all the. Can you imagine that? All power lines buried.
Which the electrical companies would pass on to us. So our bill would be, you know,
Even
$10,000
higher.
a month, right?
Don't laugh. Some people in California, many people in California actually have a $2,000 a month electric bill.
I know. I heard about.
Wow, is that right?
Yes.
Yep. And in fact, I've
2,000.
heard and I don't know, it's not a collaborated fact, but I've heard it said that 20% of PG&E's electrical customers are behind in their bills.
How can you afford to live there? How can you afford to live in? That's just one bill.
That's just one
Yeah.
bill.
Not calling taxes, state,
Yeah.
federal,
Right.
medical costs, food, you know, rent, or paying your mortgage. I don't see how you could afford to live there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, we're going off the subject.
No, but that's true. It's the bills, and that's why I don't live in California anymore. But this state is hardly any. It's moving in the same direction. Unfortunately, they're Californicating Colorado, which is a sad thing.
Well, I think that's for other states that want to grow up and be like California. I think they're going down the wrong road.
Yeah, agreed.
Actually, Colorado's had a net negative population growth. It's actually decreasing.
It is. It is for the first time in 20 years, Richard.
Yes.
More people are moving out of Colorado than moving in. And a lot of it has to do with the policies of the last 8 years, the administration that's been in power for the last 8 years. And
That's
won't
right.
mention any names, but yeah.
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah. So, but
All kinds of things are happening in Colorado, like taking all kinds of agricultural land and by condemnation and the use of eminent domain, taking over the large pieces of agricultural land for solar arrays.
Yep.
And Richard,
and condemning the land.
How many dollars an acre do they consider fair for this land that they're taking?
Well, I can tell you what XL gave to a friend of mine's brother, $40 an acre. That's it. I'm serious.
That's basically robbery. That's flat out thievery. Yeah, people don't realize that. And the other thing, you know, the the legislature voted against the bill to protect landowners because they said Colorado's population, quote unquote, was increasing, which was not the truth. They're doing this, and I don't think Colorado is the only one suffering from this, but it's to build, they need the power, not for the growing population, but for AI data centers. And
That's another thing.
mhm,
Water.
and water too. Yeah.
And is that water going to be recycled after putting anti-rust agents in it?
No, and I don't think people know about that. So can you
People
elaborate?
don't know about that, but they should.
They should.
It's toxic. And, and here's something else. Solar arrays have their place. I mean, there's no question.
Hmm.
But for large cities, maybe large cities that don't have hurricanes or tornadoes. What
Or
happens? What happens if you have solar arrays like in the state of Florida, hurricanes, and it's smashed
Yep.
to pieces, becomes particularized? Can it, by osmosis, go into plants? Cadmium sulfide, cadmium telluride, they're toxic. They cause cancer. Now, all I would say is don't assume it, but at least test. Test the groundwaters after a big hurricane, like in Florida, the Sunshine State. I'd want it to be tested.
Yep.
Well, it can happen. This thing of breaking solar panels by Mother Nature can happen just about anywhere. I understand there was baseball-sized hail in Chicago yesterday. So anybody that had solar panels in Chicago,
Yep.
ouch.
Yeah. Indiana had 4-inch size hail. Can you imagine? That's
Is
yesterday.
that right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Last night. Someone took a picture of it and posted it. That thing was huge. And so imagine that, falling on solar panels. Yeah. So solar is not the answer. And if they're planning on stealing agricultural land and grazing land to do this in eastern Colorado, that's where all the tornadoes are. If you look at Colorado.
Yes, that's right. That is right. But I don't think a lot of people don't know that the semiconductors, not all, but most of them are toxic.
Yeah.
They cause cancers.
Mhm.
And some of the people that are involved in making them in clean rooms can breathe it. I mean, they're in green, they're in white clean suits, all of them.
Mhm. Yeah.
But I knew a head guy at Enron. He may have been exposed, and he got bone cancer.
Well,
So,
Yeah.
but I can't say for sure, but he did get bone cancer, and I don't know whether it was because he breathed in the vapor, in a clean room where they were making different semiconductor materials.
Mhm.
I'm not against semiconductors, never. They're used in all electronics.
Everything.
Yeah,
But we should
but
be making semiconductors here in America again, because
I
they were
agree.
never made outside of America until the late 1990s into the 2000s, when the entire semiconductor industry packed up from Silicon Valley. Why do you think they called it Silicon Valley? And they moved everything offshore. And
Well, who produces the most rare earths?
who produced
Taiwan.
Taiwan? Seriously,
Taiwan.
a little country?
Yes. And if you look at Taiwan Semiconductor Inc., you'll see just by their stock price. But if Taiwan better be protected by the United States. Xi Jinping isn't really interested because they're Chinese people. He wants the semiconductors.
The
It's
semiconductor.
big business.
But Richard, Taiwan didn't have a semiconductor business until the late 90s, early 2000s. Because my first job out of college was at a semiconductor company, and Silicon Valley was completely semiconductor. AMD, Signetics, all
True.
Intel, they were all making fabs, and then there was little scattered companies here and there. Everything was made in Silicon Valley,
Do
and
you know what's the major sources of rare earths? The major
no, I
uh,
don't know.
country sources.
Uh,
80% China,
China,
12% Australia, and another 8% from US.
so we were shipping all that stuff in from China at the time for making semiconductors.
Yes.
Wow.
No, so that's true. So
Yeah, I didn't know that. I mean, I just worked at the.
80,
I didn't
80% of the semiconductors come from China,
China.
12% Australia, 8% US. But they're used in all electronics.
Yeah, completely. That's why during COVID, when everything went awry, um, they
Nice.
couldn't
Now,
build
the
cars.
difference between Taiwan Semiconductor has got a lot of expertise. That's what, in making semiconductors for all kinds of electronic equipment.
Right, right.
They're probably number one. That's probably why China would like to take back Taiwan. Because then look at the share of business that Taiwan Semiconductor gives to the whole world. My opinion.
Yeah. Well, no one else has any questions.
Anyway,
Oh, here we go. Lola says there was a solar farm. Oh yeah, I heard about that. That tornado was about a mile wide and was decimated in Kanaki. Is that how you say that?
yeah.
With 5 inch, yeah, softball size hail, just wiped it down. It just cleaned it
what state is that?
up. Kankakee. Where was that? Is that Indiana? I can look that up.
Okay.
It could be Key.
Yeah,
But what about the Virgin Islands? The only thing I will say, if they're destroyed, sample sample the soils afterwards. Make sure that you don't have toxic semiconductors in the soils that could go by osmosis up to the
Mhm.
plants and agricultural plants.
Yep.
yeah. It's in Illinois. Yeah, that Illinois,
Key,
Indiana.
yes.
Yeah, got just wiped
I think
out
it's
last night. Yeah, there was a little city called Lakeview that it doesn't exist anymore. It
well
completely taken off the map
destroyed.
last night. Yeah.
Wow.
It was pretty bad last night. But anyway, well, thank you. Thank you for this. It's been a lot of fun. I mean, we could probably go on forever just talking about things that are happening around the country and the world. But I want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to talk about just how we can go about protecting our homes. I know it's an uphill battle, but if we can do the best we can, right, Rick and Richard?
Right.
So good, some very good stuff. And any closing words? Let's start with Richard.
Not too many, except I think we can build up our own EMP task force calculations. Any one of us could use them. We wouldn't have to be dependent on anyone else to do our computations.
There you go.
I mean, if they're complicated problems.
Yeah, yeah.
But
My,
it's
my
okay.
closing my closing thoughts are there are other people to get wisdom from on this topic. I'm thinking of Plowman. I'm also thinking of Bill Radasky of Meditech.
Oh, yes,
I don't know how he wrote
absolutely.
these people in, but it'd really be great.
Bill Radasky, absolutely. Bill Radasky.
Yeah. Well, I expect you guys the four of you to get together and come back on the podcast once you've got the answer to all this. No, I'm just kidding. Good luck. No,
Well,
All right.
anyone can do
don't
it.
don't hold your breath for all these problems.
Okay, all right.
Right? Okay. All right. Okay.
All right, well,
Okay.
take care, and
Okay. You too, Maria.
thank
You
you
too.
everyone for joining us, and we'll see you next week on the Grid Podcast.
Okay.